Muted.
Mobilizations, and a little exercise that you can join me in going through. So with this GoToWebinar interface, be 20 minutes, and it'll be in audio only mode, and we have been told that it is typically best to use the telephone versus your computer mic and speakers. I think sometimes it's a little bit better quality for you on your end. So if you're having troubles using your, switch to the telephone and you should be in good shape. And this is the number that you dial into, and I'm hoping that you're all currently already dialed in. The presentation is going to be about 20 minutes, and then we have 10 to 40 minutes for questions afterwards. And at the end of the presentation, or I would say right at the end of it, I would suggest submitting your questions via the webinar controls that are on your screen. You can see that highlighted there. So asset-based economic development is a bottom-up approach to economic development as opposed to the top-down approach of traditional E-based economic development. It builds on the existing local resources in your community to strengthen your local and your regional economies. And it focuses on your community's natural, environmental, sociocultural, and economic advantages and how they can be leveraged into sustained economic growth and productivity. It also focuses on building capacity in your communities and strengthening connections within regions. So strengthening those connections between your surrounding communities as well. The benefits of asset-based economic development are long-term sustained economic growth, local return on investment, which we know is very important, job creation and retention, increase in per capita income, increase in local tax base, and a strengthening of your regional networks as well. Successful asset-based economic development requires strong leadership at both the local and regional levels, innovation, collaboration, a rethinking of traditional economic development paradigms, again, focusing on your assets and what you have versus trying to bring in things from the top down. And of course, like all other forms of economic development, it requires funding, and I think we all know that. When you're pursuing economic development, it's important to identify and evaluate the assets that you'll be using and their potential benefits, including how those assets can be leveraged, what the value of developing that particular resource will be, who the development of the particular asset will benefit, and what additional inputs will be needed to fully leverage that asset. And here's a few definitions for you if this is unfamiliar terminology to you. Asset refers to your community's treasures, which are the positive strengths, qualities, merits, benefits, virtues, commodities, and character embedded in every community. An asset inventory is a method for gathering information about the gifts and talents of the community's individual associations, which could be other nonprofit organizations and partner organizations, institutions such as government and education, and then your natural existing resources in the community. An asset map is a visual path that displays all those assets and positive capacities that exist in the community. And mobilizing means that you're going to try to accomplish your community goals by energizing and activating community strengths and assets. So within every community, there are at least, at a minimum, 6 categories of assets. The assets of individuals, associations, institutions, economic linkages and business assets, natural and built resources, and plans for community and economic development or history of your community that you can reference. I would also add that a 7th category would be funding sources. So here's a few examples within each of those categories. Within the individuals category, we would have our volunteers, residents in our community, and perhaps youth groups or senior citizen groups. Physical assets could include natural resources like a river or a mountain, Buildings in our downtowns, like our historic buildings or historic theaters, and existing infrastructure throughout the downtown. Associations that might be an asset to us to work with would be the Chamber of Commerce, SCORE or other organizations dedicated to providing supports to businesses, civic clubs like the Lions Club or Kiwanis or Rotary. Institutions could include government, your county and your city, educational, like maybe a local community college or even the school system, and public services available. Local economies could include cultural, arts, and agriculture. And history and plans could include economic development plans, infrastructure that exists, and growth. Here's an example of an asset map using those 6 categories as well as the 7th category of funding sources. And this demonstrates a pathway of how these all can connect to each other. You can see that local economy has the largest number of assets underneath it, with both industry, businesses, including the ones that are in your district as well as those outside the district that could support you, and arts and culture as well. We have a variety of history and plans that we can access, a variety of institutions, associations, funding sources such as sponsorships, community foundations, private foundations, lodger's tax, private donations and grants, individuals, and then of course our physical assets that can include streetscape and site furnishings, might be a train depot, vacant buildings, perhaps a community garden or a park in your district, your historic buildings, and maybe even your courthouse square. And you can actually create your own map like this using the website coggle.it. That's located in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And it's very easy to use, and you can build these really beautiful maps that are really useful and help you organize all your assets. So, connecting those assets to community transformation strategies. As many of you have heard at our Artesia quarterly meeting, and will be hearing more about as we visit your communities for your annual review process, we will be transitioning over into a community transformation strategy approach to our revitalization work. So this presentation, this webinar, will really kind of help you make that connection between how you develop community transformation strategies by using your existing assets that you have. So when you're making those connections, you want to ask yourself, what do you want to do? What is the vision that you have for your community? What purpose does this serve? What strategies would you develop? And what do you have to do that with? After you've done your asset map, what assets will you use to create this strategy? Who or what can help you get it done amongst those assets? Which individuals, associations, institutions, and businesses can be engaged in that strategy? And how do we get them to do it? How do we build a relationship with them? How do we engage the community and get them excited and make them want to be involved in helping the strategy move forward? So I want to provide an example of how you might develop a strategy using assets that you have and what sort of actions would develop from there, and then what outcomes you could see as a result. This is a photograph of the Eddy County Courthouse. It's one of the entrances to the building, and it features cattle brands from ranches, I guess you'd say, and ranching families from all over the region. And I believe this was done in the 30s or 40s when the store was built and these brands were added here. So the strategy that we've developed is that we would like to increase tourist visits by leveraging heritage assets to create permanent and short-term attractions. So we've already introduced you to the idea of the brands, and the brands would be the main asset that we're going to use to push this strategy and develop our other actions and determine which other assets we're going to engage. So you can see here under physical assets, the center square, we have the courthouse and cattle brands highlighted because that's what our main focus is. I've also pulled out other assets that we might engage in this process. Under individuals, we have ranchers because we're going to be focused on these ranching cattle brands, a local historian in the community, and the mayor as well, because he is very into the pioneering families and the history of Carlsbad, where the Eddy County Courthouse is located. In addition to the courthouse as a physical asset, we would absolutely be utilizing the downtown district because that's where the courthouse is located. Associations we might engage would be the Carlsbad Foundation, which is focused, or every year they hold an award ceremony and they honor pioneer families from the Carlsbad and Eddy County area. So we know they would have a lot of history and information about some of these cattle brands. Our local heritage organization, which puts on heritage events, could also be engaged. And the sheriff's posse would probably also want to be involved since they're still participating in some of those activities that are related to ranching. Institutions might be the county government, since the courthouse is located there, the city museum, which we could potentially work with to develop some exhibits, and also the local NMSU branch that's located in Carlsbad. The local economy that would be engaged in this would be the cultural economy, the arts and artisans economy, and agriculture. And history and plans that we could reference would be the master plan, the DPAC plan, which is the UNM Design Planning and Assistance Center plan, and also a history of Western-themed events and activities in the downtown district. So now we're moving into the asset mobilization phase of this project. We've identified our assets that we want to utilize, and now we're looking at how we're going to actually mobilize them and put this strategy into motion. So action one would be researching the brands. And you can see next to all these actions, I have O for organization, P for promotion, D for design, and you'll see E for economic vitality. Everything that we do in Main Street, we really can't silo our activities into just one of each of the 4 points. There's a really lot of crossover between them all. So I put these here as an example so you could see where these would fall under the 4 points. So for our first action, researching the brands, we would engage the Historical Society, the Carlsbad Foundation, the Sheriff's Posse, and our local ranchers to help us in that process. I put organization with every single one of these actions that we have because you're building partnerships to achieve these. And as we know, that is a huge part of our organization point, building those partnerships and collaborations. So essentially, it's involved in every single action you'll be taking in this approach. The second action is creating a museum exhibit featuring these cattle brands and the histories associated with them. And our main collaborator for that would be the museum. Next, we have holding a ceremony on the courthouse lawn honoring the ranching families, which would engage the organization and the promotion point, and we'd be working with the ranchers and the county government to make that happen. Our fourth action would be reestablishing the Western-themed events in the downtown district, which have included street dances, a rodeo parade, and outhouse races, which obviously would heavily be involved in the promotion point. And we would collaborate with the Sheriff's Posse and our downtown businesses. The fifth action is developing a retail promotion with businesses to coincide with these downtown activities and events, engaging organization, promotion, and economic vitality in that work. And our top collaborator on this would be the downtown businesses. We could also coordinate a Western-themed farmers market, again utilizing organization, promotion, and economic vitality, and working with the farmers market vendors and our downtown businesses on that. We could also develop content that would exist permanently on the county website, and we would work with the county government and the Historical Society on that. And we could also create permanent interpretive signage, working with the county government and the Historical Society on that. And then we could also enlist artists to create public art featuring the brands throughout the downtown. And that would involve the Arts Association, the county government, the city government, and the City Museum and Art Center. And here you can see a rendering from the UNM Design Planning and Assistance Center plan that was done in 2004. And this is a simple illustration from the students that worked on this, demonstrating integrating the existing brands into a wall on the courthouse lawn that could be used as seating and could be a form of public art as well. So what sort of outcomes would we see from these actions? Well, number one, we would draw tourists and visitors to the community and district, and they'd be visiting our businesses, restaurants, hotels, and other area attractions. This would increase business, restaurant, and hotel income, increase car and pedestrian traffic throughout the community and our downtown, increase attendance at events, and increase lodgers tax for the community. We would see many of the same benefits by drawing our existing residents to the downtown district, increasing business and restaurant income, increasing attendance at the events in the downtown, and increasing car and pedestrian traffic throughout the district. We would also have permanent attractions in the district, including new public art and new interpretive signage that would continue to serve as a draw to the downtown district beyond just the events that would be occurring as a part of this. So now I would challenge you to consider what you see in your own community and focus on one asset that you could develop a strategy around and determining which other assets you can engage in that process. So here is a blank slide, and I would like to welcome you to take a few minutes to think about this, and then we can open it up for questions and for feedback. And I would like to see if some individuals could maybe provide a strategy. You can type it into the questions box that should be on your screen. So if you'll just go ahead and type them into the questions box, any strategies that you could develop, and then potentially some assets that you would use as well. We'll give you a few minutes to think about that.
And this is Anna again. Also, don't feel like you're limited to questions during the webinar. We'll always take questions through email or communication with Amy later, or if you write to me. If you kind of want to take this back and think about it a little bit, or as Amy suggested, walking around your communities, if something comes to mind, please don't hesitate. But we will entertain questions now as well.
Well, so far we don't have any questions or responses to the strategy idea. Like Anna said, you can always think about this approach and then ask one of us about it at a later date. Any other questions regarding the asset-based economic development approach?
All right. Great. And we do, just as a reminder, the next in our webinar series will be taking place in October, and it's kind of the last in this series of asset-based economic development. And this one will focus on establishing economic development strategies to guide the four-point work. So again, I will be sending out emails and invitations to register for that webinar, and we appreciate you guys logging in today during your lunch hour, and we will make it available on YouTube later for you to share with members of your board or other interested community members. So we thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate you sitting in and joining us on this presentation, and we will see you next time.